It's the morning of November 7th, 1944, and 12 P38 Lightnings are soaring high over the rugged terrain of Yugoslavia. At the helm of this powerful formation is Colonel Clarence Theodore Edwinson, a seasoned ace with a keen eye for opportunity. As they scan the landscape below, something catches his attention. A distinct cloud of steam, rising steadily against the morning sky. It's a German steam train chugging along the tracks. Now this train isn't their primary objective for the day, but it's a target of opportunity, far too juicy to simply fly over and ignore. With a quick command, "Let's go get it, boys," the mission changes. Edwinson banks his P38, rolling it over into a steep, aggressive dive. Like a perfectly choreographed aerial ballet, his wingmen follow suit, their twin-boomed fighters slicing through the air. They accelerate rapidly, the roar of their engines echoing through the valleys. The locomotive grows larger and larger in their sights, a perfect slow-moving target. With fingers steady on the controls, they lock on. The satisfying thank you of the guns firing echoes in the cockpit as a storm of 50 caliber rounds and 20mm cannon shells rips through the air. The American fire tears into the locomotive. Metal shrieks and groans as bullets punch through the boiler. A massive cloud of white steam erupts from the wounds, enveloping the train as it grinds to a halt. Mission accomplished. The Lightnings pull up sharply, climbing back into the relative safety of the sky, their silhouettes briefly framed against the plume of steam. But their celebration is short-lived. The Germans on the ground are anything but helpless. Suddenly, the sky around the American planes is filled with sinister black puffs. German flak guns have opened up, throwing a deadly curtain of anti-aircraft fire into the path of the retreating P-38s. The explosions are dangerously close, and the air is thick with shrapnel. The pilots can hear the chilling sound of metal fragments piercing the thin aluminum skins of their aircraft. What began as a simple strafing run has now turned into a desperate fight for survival. Every second in the air is a gamble as they jink and weave, trying to escape the deadly flak and make it back to friendly territory. This single impulsive decision to attack a train has escalated into a life-or-death struggle, high above the mountains of Yugoslavia. For Colonel Edwinson and his men, the flight home just got a whole lot longer. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more.
Edwinson shouts on the radio, "Everyone get low." The squadron turns to dive back to the ground, trying to escape the German guns, but it's too late. One P-38 is struck directly and bursts into flames as the entire group dives for safety. The pilot's desperate voice crackles over the radio. "I'm hit, I'm going down." Edwinson levels out low over the trees and whips his head back, searching for his man. But instead, he sees a massive fireball as the stricken plane slams into a hillside. "Does anyone see a chute?" he asks, his voice tight. Every pilot listens, hoping someone else will respond with a yes. But the silence is deafening. "Negative, sir." Fury fills Edwinson's heart. Copy. The US planes roar over the Serbian mountains, hugging the terrain. Suddenly, the ground drops away beneath them, revealing a huge valley with an airfield. It looks exactly like the target area described in their mission briefing. Seconds later, Edwinson spots what he expects: a long line of trucks and tanks heading north on the road to Belgrade. There's no shadow of a doubt in his mind. This is their chance for revenge. There are those sons of, he cuts himself off. Blue flight, get that German convoy. Red and yellow, take the airfield. Yes, sir, his pilots respond, peeling off to attack. On the ground, the Soviets are completely unaware that they've been misidentified by the Americans. The Red Army and Yugoslav partisans are celebrating the anniversary of the October Revolution. They drive along the road, soldiers singing and Soviet flags flying proudly in the air. Their celebration is happy, a moment of joy in the midst of war. Until ... The deep rumble of engines interrupts their melody. The soldiers look up to the sky and see the unmistakable shape of P-38 Lightnings flying in the distance. Their silver fuselages glinting in the sun, but instead of flying past, the planes begin to dive. The American pilots, fueled by grief and rage, are lining up for their attack run. The Soviets on the ground, initially waving, now realize something is terribly wrong. These aren't friendly planes passing by. They are coming in hot. The soldiers scramble for cover as the first P-38s open fire. Bullets tear through the trucks and the column erupts into chaos. The celebration has turned into a battlefield, and the Allies are now firing on each other in one of the most tragic friendly fire incidents of the war. What happens next is a brutal clash born from a terrible mistake. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more untold stories from history.
As their allies appeared on the horizon, the Soviet soldiers' faces lit up with smiles. The celebrations resumed and the convoy marched on, a picture of victory. But then, a few noticed something was wrong. Aircraft were breaking formation, turning straight towards them. No, this wasn't a friendly flyby. They were coming in for an assault. The P-38 Lightnings bore down on the columns, the roar of their engines growing louder. A few Soviet soldiers, realizing the horrifying mistake, scrambled to warn the incoming Americans. They grabbed flags, lifting them high and waving them desperately, hoping the pilots would see. But it was too late. The pilots didn't notice. They pulled the trigger. Bullets tore through the formation of men and vehicles, cutting the Soviets down in a storm of lead. The column descended into frantic panic as American bombs rained down, blasting through what remained of the convoy and inflicting heavy casualties. At the nearby airfield, the distant explosions were heard. Lookouts, standing at attention, saw a swarm of aircraft heading straight for them. Battery to the fight. The alert sounded, and Soviet soldiers rushed to their anti-air guns. The emplacements came to life with a furious roar, tracers flying out to meet the attackers. In the air, Major Edwinson led his men down towards what they believed was a Luftwaffe airfield full of Bf-109s. Anti-aircraft fire swept through their formation, striking planes, but they were undeterred. 20mm shells and 50 caliber bullets poured from the Lightning's powerful armament, ripping across the rows of parked aircraft. The pilots heard enemy fire crackling against their own planes. Pull up! The Lightnings pulled out of the dive, but one failed to follow. Second Lieutenant Alden Carlson yanked on his yoke with all his strength. He'd taken severe damage from the Soviet guns. He was flying too low, attracting the fire of the entire airfield. Not coming out, more impacts tore his plane to shreds. Control slipped from his grasp, and the P-38 crashed a kilometer away, exploding with Carlson inside. Seeing the ball of flame, Edwinson's anger surged. They were going to make the Germans pay. He ordered his squadron to gain altitude and go in again. Down below, anti-aircraft fire continued to stream skyward at what the Soviets believed were German FW-189s. Red Army pilots rushed to the remaining Yak fighters through smoke and fire. The first two to start up were piloted by Lieutenant Krivinogov and his wingman, Junior Lieutenant Shipulya. As they taxied, Krivinogov saw the fighters turning back for another pass. Shipulya, faster! They lined up and smashed the throttle to full. The Yak-9 South roared down the runway and lifted off, the terrifying sight of the enemy looming overhead. The two Soviets skimmed the treetops, racing away. But behind them, the other Soviet pilots weren't so lucky. They took off in a large group, becoming easy targets for a squadron that had already lost 2 men. Get those planes before they gain altitude, Edwinson commanded. The Lightnings dove in at maximum speed, peppered by the continuing anti-air fire from the ground.
The American P-38s have their crosshairs on target, and they pull the triggers. Bullets and shells tear through the Soviet planes. One Yak is immediately destroyed, and several others are damaged. The surviving Yaks break into evasive maneuvers as the lightning-fast P-38s soar overhead, all except one. A lone Soviet pilot sees his attacker pulling out of a dive and spots a fleeting opportunity. But in a split second, he pulls his Yak upward and unleashes a furious burst of cannon fire. The American P-38 flies straight through it and is ripped to shreds. The plane bursts into flames, spinning violently out of control. Inside, Second Lieutenant Philip Ruhr is trapped with no chance to escape. His plane plummets to the earth, crashing northeast of the Soviet airfield. High above, the remaining P-38s gain altitude, climbing out of range of the anti-air guns. The American commander Edwinson looks down at the wreckage. 1 enemy and 2 friendly planes burn on the ground. This fight is tougher than he ever expected. Over the radio, his voice is tense. A lot of fighters incoming. Form a defensive circle. We're shooting our way out. Meanwhile, Soviet pilots Krivonagic and Shapulia race low over the trees, accelerating to well over 400 kilometers an hour. The sudden attack has left them isolated, but they see the American fighters opening fire on the helpless transport column below. They know what they have to do. The pair of Yak 9 South pull up into a steep, vertical climb. For the first time in history, fighters of the United States and the Soviet Union are facing off in air-to-air combat. Shapulia races in pursuit of a P38. He sweeps in at high speed and opens fire with his 20mm cannon and .50 caliber machine guns. His shots land on one of the P-38's twin fuselages, but it doesn't go down. Shapulia soars by at blistering speed and turns away to prepare for another attack. But the American pilot has already called for backup. Two circling P-38s dive to his rescue. Krivonagic spots the danger to his wingman and screams into the radio, "Maneuver, move to the right." It's just in the nick of time. Shapulia pulls hard at the last second, narrowly escaping the P-38's lethal burst. He twists and dodges, but he's on the defensive now. "They're on my tail," Krivonagic responds. "Hold on, I'm coming." He pushes his plane to its limits, his heart pounding with every burst of tracer fire launched at his friend. He's coming in fast. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow for the thrilling conclusion to this incredible story.
His crosshairs line up with one of the two Lightnings. He pulls the trigger. The gunshots streak across the sky, narrowly missing the enemy aircraft. The first American pilot breaks off the attack, but Krivonagic ignores him. He's already moving on to the next P-38, hounding the other pilot, Shapulia. He takes aim and opens fire. His rounds are perfectly placed, hitting the Lightning's twin booms and bursting the aircraft into flames. It flies on, but it's out of control. The American pilot opens the canopy and bails out. His burning plane crashes 5 miles north of the Soviet airfield. "Thank you, Commander," says Shapulia. "You're welcome," Krivonagic replies. "Get ready." They brace for an onslaught, horribly outnumbered. But just then, the rest of the Soviet squadron bursts onto the scene, opening fire and scattering their enemies. Krivonagic is relieved. Victory seems within reach now. The two pilots rush back into the fight, but in the chaos of battle, they get split up. Krivonagic sets his sights on an enemy and gives chase, spiraling upwards through the air. The P-38 tries to match him, but it's not optimized for low-altitude flying. Krivonagic quickly catches up. He has the American in his sights. On the ground, a Soviet anti-aircraft unit is firing at every enemy target they see. Whether it was just bad aim or an overenthusiastic gun crew, we'll never know. But they send a volley directly at Krivonagic. He gets no warning. His yak is struck directly and disintegrates. Shapulia tries to raise his friend on the radio, but all he sees is a burning wreck plummeting to the ground. His friend is gone. Shaking the loss from his mind, he spots an American target below. He's outnumbered and now alone, but he dives back into the fight. P-38s swarm around him. One performs a steep climb, stalls, and then opens fire. Shapulia has no chance. He flies straight through its fire and is shot down. The burning wreck of his plane crashes just 500 meters from the airfield he was defending. Soviet losses are mounting. Another yak is shot down. Desperate, the base commander contacts every nearby unit, begging for reinforcements. Rushing to the scene is a fresh group of Yak-3 fighters led by Captain Alexander Koldunov. They're responding to the airfield's desperate plea for help, but Koldunov has no idea what he's about to fly into. Something is very wrong. Soviet ace Alexander Koldunov is racing toward a reported dogfight. His ground control told him he's fighting German FW-189s, but Koldunov knows that can't be right. The FW-189 is a reconnaissance aircraft, not a fighter. It's never used for attacks like this. As he closes in on the battle, the terrible truth becomes clear. The aircraft swarming his comrades are not German. That is the unmistakable twin-boom shape of an American P-38 Lightning. Koldunov immediately abandons his attack run. He roars alongside the American fighters, wagging his wings, desperately trying to show them the red stars on his plane, but it's no use. One of the Lightnings slows, gets on his tail, and opens fire. Koldenov yanks his plane into a hard brake, narrowly escaping the volley of bullets. He has to stop this. He flies straight back into the chaos, trying again to get the American pilot's attention. Finally, he pulls up right beside a P38 flown by Captain Edwin. Ed F. Edwinson. Edwinson glances over and his eyes go wide. A cold dread washes over him. He looks around at the other planes in the dogfight. Every single one of the supposed enemies is marked with the Soviet red star. He screams into his radio, "Cease fire! Cease fire! They're Soviets!" He orders his squadron. "Everyone back to base now." Repeat, everyone back to base now. The P-38s turn west and flee, but the Soviet yaks, still thinking they're under attack, give chase. On the Soviet side, an officer realizes the mistake and orders, "All pilots, stop the pursuit, these are allies." One by one, the Soviet fighters break off and return to base, bringing the horrific friendly fire incident to an end. In the aftermath, some in the Soviet high command believe the attack was a deliberate act of betrayal. For a moment, the incident threatened to create a major crisis between the Allies. Fortunately, the U.S. admitted its mistake. In a letter, they explained the chain of errors that led their pilots to believe they were engaging German forces over Yugoslavia. While a Soviet account of the event was later released, American information remains scarce. Many believe the full details are still classified and won't be revealed until 100 years after the event. Interestingly, not far from this very location, another incredible aerial event would take place 55 years later. Check out this next video to see how the world's first stealth fighter, the F-117 Nighthawk, was shot down. Thanks for watching.